Captain Hana walked into the massive arena with her head held high. The walls around her were so tall they seemed to touch the stars above. Thousands of alien creatures filled the seats, and they all stared down at her with hungry eyes that wanted to see blood. These beings had traveled from across the galaxy to watch what they called entertainment. But what Hana knew was murder. The arena floor was made of black stone that reflected the strange purple lights hanging from the ceiling. She could hear the crowd making excited noises in languages she did not understand, but their meaning was clear. They wanted to watch her die, and they wanted it to happen. Slowly, Commander Vextar stepped forward from a group of reptile-like aliens. Her skin was dark green with patches of yellow, and her eyes were like a snake. She was tall, much taller than any human, and when she smiled, Hana could see rows of sharp teeth that looked like they could bite through metal. Behind Vextar stood other alien commanders from different species. There was a blue-skinned giant with 4 arms, a creature that looked like it was made of rocks, and several others that Hana had never seen before. All of them wore uniforms covered in medals and symbols of rank. All of them looked at Hana like she was already dead. The crowd grew quiet as Vextar raised one of her clawed hands to speak. Her voice was loud and clear, and it echoed off the arena walls so everyone could hear every word she said. "You stand before the Galactic Hunting Guild." She announced the most ancient and honored tradition in our empire. For 1,000 years, we have tested the courage and skill of every species that dares to call itself civilized. 27 different species have tried to survive the Deathworld hunt. 27 species have failed completely. Hana stood perfectly still as the alien commander spoke. She had learned long ago that the best way to deal with bullies was to show no fear at all. Her dark eyes never looked away from Vextar's face, and her hands stayed relaxed at her sides. The rules are simple. Vextar continued, "You will be taken to planet Korath, a world so dangerous that we use it only for the most serious criminals and the most foolish volunteers. You will have basic survival gear, nothing more. You must stay alive for 30 standard days and reach the extraction point. If you succeed, your pathetic little world of Earth will be granted freedom. If you fail, you will die, and your planet will remain our property forever." A hologram appeared in the center of the arena, showing a planet that looked like a nightmare come to life. The surface was covered in crystal forests that glowed with sick green light. Oceans of liquid methane burned, with blue flames that never went out. Mountains moved on their own, crushing everything in their path. The sky was filled with creatures that looked like metal birds with razor-sharp feathers. "This is planet Korath," Vextar said with obvious pride. In her voice, every living thing on this world has been changed by our scientists to be the perfect killer. The shadow beasts can walk through solid walls, and their claws can cut through battle armor. The razor birds attack in groups of 10,000, and they never stop until everything is dead. The titan worms are so large they can swallow entire spaceships, and they live under the ground where you cannot see them coming. The hologram showed scenes of previous hunters being torn apart by creatures that moved too fast to follow. Clearly, Hana watched without changing her expression at all. She had studied these recordings for months before volunteering. She knew exactly what she was walking into. The temperature on Korath changes from freezing cold to burning hot every 6 hours, Vextar went on. The air is barely safe to breathe, and it smells like rotting meat. The plants will try to eat you if you get too close. The water will poison you if you drink it. Even the rocks are dangerous because they explode when you step on them. The alien crowd was getting more excited as Vextar described all the ways Hana would probably die. They made sounds like cheering and laughing, but louder and more cruel than anything humans would make Hana could. Feel their hunger for violence, like heat from a fire. No species has ever lasted more than 6 hours on Korath, Vextar said. The longest survivor was a Krellian war champion who had won battles against entire armies. He made it exactly 6 hours, and 12 minutes before the shadow beasts caught him. The shortest time was 4 minutes held by a Zephyrian speedrunner who could move faster than most vehicles. Hana finally spoke for the first time since entering the arena. Her voice was calm and steady, and she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Commander, with all due respect, you clearly have never studied human history properly." The arena went completely silent. Everyone stared at her like she had just said something impossible. Vextar. Face showed confusion and anger. "We did not climb to the top of Earth food chain by being the strongest or the fastest creatures alive." Hana continued. "We got there by being too stubborn to die. When a saber-toothed tiger tried to eat us, we invented spears. When the Ice Age tried to freeze us, we learned to make fire. When diseases tried to kill us, we created medicine. We have never accepted that something was impossible just because it looked scary." The crowd started making angry noises. Some of them stood up in their seats and shouted things in their alien languages that were probably not polite. Hana ignored them completely and kept talking. "You keep telling me about all these monsters and how dangerous they are, but you are forgetting something very important, Commander. I am not just any human. I am a human who volunteered for this mission, knowing exactly what I was walking into. That makes me the most dangerous thing you have ever put on your little hunting ground." Vextar confidence wavered for the first time. There was something deeply unsettling about the way this small human stood perfectly still while discussing her own likely death. Most species would show fear or anger, or at least acceptance. This human showed only calm, determination, and a smile that made the alien commander feel uncomfortable. On Earth, we have a saying, Hana continued. "When something seems impossible, that just means nobody has tried the right approach yet. I have spent my entire life doing things that other people said could not be done. I have survived battles that killed soldiers twice my size. I have completed missions in places where the environment itself was trying to kill me, and I have never once accepted defeat as an option." She took a step forward toward the group of alien commanders. None of them moved, but Hana could see in their body language that her confidence was making them nervous. "I grew up in the mountains of Korea where the winters are so cold they can kill you in minutes, and the summers are so hot you cannot work during the day. I learned to hunt from my grandfather who could track animals through forests so thick you cannot see 5 meters ahead. I joined the military where they taught me to survive in deserts and jungles and frozen wastelands. I have fought in wars where the enemy had better weapons and more soldiers and air support." The arena was completely quiet now. Even the bloodthirsty crowd seemed to sense that something unusual was happening. This was not how condemned prisoners usually behaved before their execution. When your people invaded Earth, I was part of the resistance movement that held out for 3 years against impossible odds. I have seen cities burn and friends die and entire armies disappear. But I never stopped fighting, and I never stopped believing that we could win. Vextar tried to regain control of the situation. "Very well, human," she said. "Transport to the surface begins in 1 standard hour. Use this time to say goodbye to your life. At least try to entertain our viewers with your death." As guards escorted Hana toward the preparation chamber, she thought about her teammate Jin, who had died in the space battle above Earth, and her brother Wu, who was still fighting with the resistance. She had promised both of them that she would find a way to free their world. Today, she would either keep that promise or die trying. The preparation chamber was a small white room with no windows. The gear they gave her was basic but functional. A combat knife that looked sharp enough, a small energy weapon with very few shots left, basic camping supplies that might last a few days if she was careful, and a communication device that would only work on day 30. If she lived that long, most species would look at this equipment and despair. It was nowhere near enough to survive even one day against the horrors of planet Korath. Hana checked each item carefully, then sat down on the floor to meditate the way. Her grandfather had taught her in the mountains of Korea. She had always been the kind of person who got calmer under pressure, not more panicked. The impossible odds did not scare her. They made her feel more alive than she had felt since the invasion began. She was finally going to get the chance to hit back at the aliens who had enslaved her world. When the transport beam activated 30 minutes later, Hana stepped into the light with her head held high and that same confident smile on her face. The alien spectators watched eagerly, expecting to see another quick death for their entertainment. What they were about to witness instead would become the most legendary hunt in galactic history. The transport beam dropped Hana in the middle of a crystal forest, just as the twin sons of Korath began to disappear behind the jagged mountains. The temperature was falling fast, and she could already feel the cold trying to bite through her jacket. The crystal trees around her were beautiful in a deadly way. They looked like giant pieces of colored glass reaching toward the purple sky. As soon as her feet touched the ground, the trees began to sing. It was not music like humans would make, but a sound that went straight into her brain and tried to scramble her thoughts. The frequency was designed to confuse and disorient any creature that heard it. Most species would be paralyzed within minutes, unable to think clearly enough to defend themselves. Hana reached into her jacket and pulled out a small music player that she had hidden from the guards. She put the earbuds in and turned the volume up loud. The heavy metal music from Earth drowned out the crystal song completely. She had studied the reports from previous hunts very carefully. Every species that had died here had tried to fight Korath on its own terms. Humans were famous throughout the galaxy for refusing to play by anyone else's rules. She began moving through the forest, using skills she had learned during hunting trips with her grandfather in the Korean mountains, combined with military training that had taken her through some of Earth's most dangerous combat zones. The shadow beasts were already following her scent. But they were used to prey that panicked and ran in circles. Hana moved like a predator herself, controlled and purposeful. The first shadow beast materialized from the darkness between two large crystal trees. It was twice her height, with arms longer than her entire body. Its claws looked like they could cut through steel, and its red eyes glowed with intelligence that was both alien and hungry. According to the guild records, a pack of these creatures had killed the previous challenger. In less than 10 minutes, Hana did not run. She did not even reach for her weapon. Instead, she did something that no previous challenger had ever tried. She stood perfectly still and watched the creature with curious interest. The shadow beast circled, her slowly confused by her lack of fear. It was used to prey that either fled in terror or attacked in desperation. This small human just observed it like she was studying an interesting but harmless animal at a zoo. The creature had the ability to phase in and out of solid matter at will, which made it nearly impossible to fight with normal weapons. When it was in its shadow form, bullets and blades would pass right through it. When it became solid to attack, it moved so fast that most species could not react in time. But Hana was watching for something specific. She noticed that when the creature phased through solid matter, there was a brief moment where it had to become completely solid again to interact with the physical world. That moment lasted only a fraction of a second, but it was when the creature was vulnerable to attack. The timing had to be perfect. The shadow beast finally grew tired of circling and lunged forward with its claws extended. It expected to tear through this strange prey like tissue paper. Instead, its claws passed through empty air as Hana moved to the side at exactly the right moment. Her combat knife found the creature's throat just as it solidified for its killing strike. The blade was enhanced with technology that human resistance fighters had stolen from a crashed alien ship during the war. It cut through the shadow beast's neck like it was made of butter. The creature dropped dead before it even realized what had happened. Black blood pooled on the crystal ground beneath its body. "First rule of hunting humans," Hana said to the corpse as she cleaned her blade. "We are always watching, always learning, always adapting. You cannot beat an enemy who studies your weaknesses while you are trying to scare them." The pack of shadow beasts that had been moving in to help with the kill suddenly found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. A prey species that had just killed their alpha without showing any fear at all. The psychological effect was devastating. These creatures had evolved to hunt through intimidation and overwhelming force. They had no experience dealing with a predator who was smaller but clearly more intelligent. Hana began moving again, heading toward higher ground where she could make a safe camp for the night. The pack followed at a distance, no longer confident enough to attack directly. She had fundamentally changed the rules of engagement. Instead of being prey running from predators, she had become a competitor in their territory as the temperature continued to drop toward freezing. Hana found a sheltered spot between two large crystal formations that would protect her from the worst of the wind. She set up a basic camp using techniques that would have been familiar to any human who had ever gone camping in harsh conditions. The alien architects of this death world had designed every challenge to be lethal to spacefaring species who relied on technology and controlled environments. They had never considered that one species might still remember how to survive in the wilderness with nothing but primitive tools and stubborn determination. She gathered dry crystal fragments that would burn cleanly and built a small fire in a ring of stones. The light would attract predators, but it would also keep her warm and give her a psychological advantage. Predators expected prey to hide in darkness, not announce their location with bright flames. The shadow beasts settled in to wait at the edge of the firelight. They could sense that something was wrong with this hunt, but their simple minds could not understand what had changed. All they knew was that the small creature sitting by the fire did not smell like fear. It smelled like confidence, and that confused them greatly. Hana used the quiet time to examine her equipment more carefully and plan her strategy for the coming days. She had 29 more days to reach the extraction point, and she intended to use every single one of them to learn everything she could about this planet and its creatures. Knowledge was power, and power was survival. The energy weapon had enough charges for maybe 6 shots, so she would have to use it very carefully. The combat knife was her primary weapon, but it required getting close to enemies, which was always dangerous. The camping supplies would last about a week if she was careful, but she was already planning to supplement them with resources from the planet A's. The night grew deeper and colder. More predators began to gather at the edge of her firelight. She could see glowing eyes in the darkness and hear strange sounds that probably meant different creatures were communicating with each other. Most species would be terrified by this display of overwhelming force. Hana smiled her famous smile and began sharpening her knife on a piece of crystal. The sound it made was sharp and clear, and it seemed to make the watching predators nervous. They had expected her to cower in fear or try to hide. Instead, she was calmly preparing for battle while humming an old Korean folk song her grandfather had taught her. When the attack finally came, it was not what anyone expected. 3 different species of predators rushed her camp at the same time, expecting to overwhelm her with numbers and variety. Instead, they found a human who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Hana rolled away from the fire as claws and teeth swept through the space where she had been sitting. She came up running toward the largest attacker, not away from it. The creature was so surprised by this response that it hesitated for just a moment. That moment was all she needed. Her knife found the soft spot under its chin, and the creature fell with a crash that shook the crystal trees around them. The other attackers suddenly found themselves facing a human who was clearly not behaving like normal prey. She was hunting them right back by dawn. 3 more creatures lay dead. Around her camp, and the survivors had retreated to a safe distance to reconsider their tactics, Hana sat by her rebuilt fire and ate a breakfast made from rations and meat from one of her kills. The protein would help keep her strong, and the psychological effect of eating her enemies would make the other predators think twice about attacking. She had survived her first night on the Deathworld, not by hiding or running, but by proving that humans were a different kind of prey entirely. The Watchers in the arena were beginning to realize that something unprecedented was happening. This small human female was not just surviving the challenges of Korath, she was thriving in them. As she broke camp and began moving toward her next objective, Hana looked up at the alien satellites that were broadcasting her every move to the galaxy. She knew that somewhere out there other humans were watching and learning from her example. "You wanted to see what humans are really like," she said to the cameras. "Now you are going to find out why we have never accepted defeat as an option." On the third day, Hana encountered her first razorbird flock. The creatures came from the crystal peaks, like a living storm cloud that blocked out the purple sky. Their metallic feathers caught the light of the twin suns and created a glittering wall of death that moved with terrifying speed. Each bird was the size of a human arm, but there were thousands of them moving together like a single deadly organism. Previous challengers had tried two different approaches when facing the razorbird. Flocks. Some had attempted to hide in caves or under rock formations, hoping the birds would pass by without noticing them. Others had tried to fight their way through the swarm using weapons and brute force. Both strategies had failed completely. The birds were too intelligent to be fooled by simple hiding and too numerous to be defeated by direct combat. Hana had spent the previous 2 days studying the birds from a safe distance, using techniques her grandfather had taught her for observing wild animals. She watched how they flew and how they communicated with each other. She noted when they hunted and when they rested. She learned their patterns the way a good hunter always learned about their prey. The razorbirds were pack hunters, but their coordination depended on a complex system of acoustic signals that allowed them to move as one giant organism. Each bird made specific sounds that told the others where to fly and when to attack. The leader bird used a particular frequency that controlled the entire flock. When the flock spotted her crossing an open area between crystal formations, they began their attack dive with their signature shrieking call that could be heard for kilometers. The sound was meant to freeze prey, with terror while the birds descended like falling knives. But Hana was ready for them. She had positioned herself near a cluster of the singing crystals that made the forest so dangerous to other species. Using her combat knife, she struck the crystals in a specific pattern that her enhanced hearing had identified during her observation period. The harmonic feedback created a sound wave that completely disrupted the bird's communication system. The perfectly coordinated killing machine became a confused mass of individual birds crashing into each other and the crystal formations around them. Without their acoustic coordination, they could not maintain formation or execute their attack patterns. They scattered in all directions, colliding. With trees and rocks and each other, Hana moved through the chaos like a dancer who knew every step of a deadly ballet. Her blade found targets with surgical precision, striking at the weak points she had identified during her study period. Within minutes, the flock was either dead or retreating in complete disarray. The few survivors fled back toward the mountains, making sounds that were clearly distress calls. "Back home, we call this turning the tables," she said to the recording device that broadcast her words to the watching alien audience. "You have been using your monster's strengths against other species for so long that you forgot every strength can become a weakness if you understand it well enough." The alien spectators in the arena were beginning to feel something they had never experienced while watching the Deathworld hunt uncertainty. This human was not just surviving the challenges, she was making them look easy while explaining exactly how she was doing it. More concerning, she seemed to be enjoying herself. Commander Vextar watched the broadcasts with growing unease that she tried to hide from her subordinates. In 3 days, this human had eliminated threats that had killed entire teams of the galaxy most feared warriors. She was not just lucky or particularly skilled, she was demonstrating a completely different approach to survival that none of the other species had ever considered. The human fights like she is studying for an examination, reported. Dr. Kells the Guild, xenobiologist. She observes the creature's behavior patterns, identifies their weaknesses, and then exploits those weaknesses with precision that suggests advanced tactical training. Increase the difficulty. Vexitar ordered her staff. Release the Titan worms ahead of schedule on Korath. Surface Hana had climbed to a high vantage point that gave her a view of the surrounding territory for several kilometers. She was making notes about the various threats and resources in the area. When the ground began to shake, the vibrations started small, but quickly grew stronger, until loose crystal fragments were falling from the trees around her. She knew what was coming. The Titan worms were massive creatures that could tunnel through solid rock as easily as swimming through water. They were supposed to be the final challenge encountered only near the extraction point on day 30. The fact that they were being released early told her that the guild was getting desperate. The first worm erupted from the ground, less than 50 meters from her position. Its mouth was large enough to swallow a small spacecraft and was lined with teeth that could crush battleship armor. The creature roar shook the entire crystal forest and sent every other predator in the area fleeing in terror. The sound was so loud that it made her ears ring even through her protective music. Hana looked down at the massive creature and smiled her famous smile. "Well, hello there, beautiful you. Are early, but I suppose we can get this dance started." She had noticed something important about the Titan worms while studying the guild archive footage. They were ambush predators that relied on surprise and overwhelming size to catch their prey. Once they committed to an attack, they could not change direction quickly. Their own immense size and power had become a limitation that could be exploited. The worm lunged upward, expecting to catch easy prey in its massive jaws. Instead, it found empty air as Hana leaped from crystal formation to crystal formation, using her smaller size and human agility to stay ahead of the creature attacks. Each time the worm struck it, embedded itself deeper in the crystal formations, becoming more trapped and frustrated. The crystal trees were incredibly hard and sharp. When the Titan worm tried to bite through them, its teeth got stuck in the crystalline structure. For 10 minutes, Hana played a deadly game of tag, using the environment itself as her weapon. The creature massive size that was supposed to be its greatest advantage became its weakness. After several minutes of this frustrating chase, the Titan worm had wedged itself so deeply between the crystal spires that it could not move effectively. Its struggles only made the situation worse, as more crystal fragments fell and trapped it further. Hana dropped down onto the creature head and drove her enhanced blade into the one soft spot she had identified behind its eyes during her research. The monster that was supposed to be the ultimate challenge died because it had never learned to fight an opponent who was smart enough to use its own strength against it. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as a human female barely tall enough to reach most aliens, Shoulders stood on top of a dead Titan worm and calmly cleaned her weapon. The impossible was happening, and they were all witnessing it, broadcast live across every civilized world. "You know what your problem is?" she said to the dead creature as she climbed down from its massive head. "You have been the apex predator for so long that you forgot the most important rule of survival. There is always something higher up the food chain. Today that something is me news of the human." Success was spreading beyond the guild ability to control it. On enslaved worlds throughout the galaxy, resistance movements were watching the broadcasts and learning that the invincible galactic powers could be defeated by intelligence determination, and the simple refusal to accept defeat on the planet Zerion. The blue-skinned Zephyrians who had been enslaved for 2 centuries began organizing their first rebellion in generations. On Keltos, the rock people who had been used as mining slaves started refusing their work orders. On distant Vorthan, the bird-like natives began attacking their alien overseers, Commander. Vextar received reports of uprisings on 17 different worlds by the end of the 3rd day. Each rebellion used tactics that mirrored what they had seen the human demonstrate. Study, the enemy find their weaknesses, turn their strengths against them, never give up. The human has become more than a survivor, she said to the emergency council meeting. She has become a symbol of resistance. We cannot allow this to continue, but they also could not be seen interfering with their own hunt without destroying their credibility. The solution would have to be subtle and deadly. They would send something that was not officially part of the challenge. By day 15, Hana had completely changed the ecosystem of Korath Death Zone. The surviving predators had learned to avoid the areas where she made her camps. Some of the more intelligent species had begun following her from a distance, not as hunters but as scavengers hoping to feed on the creatures she killed. The shadow beasts no longer hunted in the crystal forests during daylight hours. The razorbirds had abandoned their traditional nesting areas near her route. The smaller predators that used to swarm over anything that moved now scattered whenever they caught her scent. It was as if the entire food chain had been turned upside down by the presence of one small human female. The alien audience was no longer watching for entertainment. They were studying her methods with a mixture of fascination and growing fear. This human was demonstrating capabilities that challenged everything they thought they knew about the species' hierarchy in their galaxy. She is not just surviving reported. Dr. Kels during his daily briefing to the guild leadership. She is actively hunting our apex predators and using their territories as her base of operations. The psychological impact on the ecosystem is unprecedented. Commander Vextar had been receiving increasingly worried communications from worlds across the Empire. The human broadcasts were inspiring rebellion on a scale not seen since the Great Wars of Conquest centuries ago. What had started as routine entertainment was becoming a galaxy-wide propaganda disaster. The turning point came when Hana reached the methane seas that covered the southern continent of Korath. These burning oceans were home to the Void Crawlers creatures so dangerous that even the guild scientists who created them were afraid to study them closely. The Void Crawlers existed partially in normal space and partially in hyperspace, which made them effectively invulnerable to conventional weapons. They could attack from dimensions that most species could not. Even perceive they had killed the last 3 challengers before their victims even knew they were under attack. Hana stood on the shore of the burning methane sea and watched the creatures' hyperdimensional forms moving beneath the surface like shadows cast by things that did not exist. The liquid methane burned with blue flames that never went out, creating an ocean of fire that stretched to the horizon. Other species had tried to avoid the Void Crawlers or find ways around their territory. Both approaches had failed because the creatures could sense life forms across dimensional barriers and hunt them through spaces that had no physical existence. Hana decided to try a completely different approach. She was going fishing for 3 days. She observed the Void Crawlers' feeding patterns from her camp on the burning shore. She noticed that when they fed, they had to become fully present in normal space to digest their prey. It was a brief vulnerability that lasted only minutes, but it was enough. Using materials scavenged from her previous kills, Hana constructed what her grandfather would have recognized as a traditional Korean fishing trap, scaled up and modified for alien prey. She used the singing crystals to create a harmonic lure and baited the trap with a carefully prepared mixture of pheromones from the creatures she had already defeated. The first Void Crawler took the bait within hours as it began to feed, becoming solid in normal space to process its meal. Hana trap activated. crystal spears driven by stored kinetic energy from the planet. Harsh winds pierced the creature vulnerable feeding form with perfect timing. The monster that existed partially outside normal reality died because a human female had outsmarted it with a fishing technique that was older than recorded history. The remaining void crawlers sensed the death of their pack mate and retreated to deeper parts of the methane sea for the first time in the planet history as a hunting ground. The ultimate predators were hiding from their prey. "You know what your problem is?" she said to the dead creature as she harvested useful materials from its corpse. "You have been the apex predator for so long that you forgot the most important rule of survival. There is always something higher up the food chain." Today that something is me, the news of her victory over the void crawlers spread through the galactic communication networks faster than the guild could control it on enslaved worlds throughout the Empire. Resistance movements were watching the broadcasts and learning that the invincible galactic powers could be defeated. On the mining world of Krestos, the enslaved Draknari began their first uprising in 300 years using tactics they had learned from watching Hana. They studied their overseers' weaknesses and turned the aliens' advanced technology against them on the agricultural planet Zarion, the plant-based Verdani, who had been considered too peaceful to resist, began using their knowledge of biology to create weapons from the very crops they were forced to grow. On distant Helios, the energy beings who had been imprisoned in containment fields began coordinating their escape attempts, using principles of patience and timing that they had observed in the human broadcasts. Commander Vexatar realized that win or lose this human had already accomplished something far more dangerous than simply surviving the hunt. She had shown the EB galaxy that humans did not think like other species. They did not accept limitations or follow established rules. They created their own solutions to impossible problems. The emergency council meeting lasted for hours as reports came in from across the Empire. 17 worlds were in open rebellion. 23 more were showing signs of unrest. The human tactical innovations were being adapted and improved by dozens of different species. "We have to stop the broadcasts," insisted Councillor Jektar. "Every day this continues. More worlds rebel." The humans are sharing her methods with resistance movements across the galaxy. "We cannot stop the broadcasts without admitting that we fear a single human female." Vexatar replied, "That would be even more damaging to our reputation than allowing them to continue." The solution they reached was both desperate and dangerous. They would deploy the Omega Predator, a creature that existed solely to kill with no other biological functions. It had been created specifically to eliminate threats to the guild power, but using it would mean breaking their own rules about the hunt. The deployment was supposed to be secret, but Hana enhanced communication system had been intercepting guild transmissions for days. She knew they were coming for her with their ultimate weapon. "Well, this should be interesting," she said as she tracked the incoming transport. "They are so scared of me reaching that extraction point that they are willing to cheat their own system. Time to show them why that was a mistake." With 15 days remaining until extraction, Hana was no longer just trying to survive. She was actively hunting every apex predator on the planet, turning the Deathworld hunt into something it had never been before, a demonstration of human ingenuity and determination that was inspiring rebellion across the galaxy. The Omega Predator was everything the guild propaganda claimed, a perfect killing machine with no weaknesses and no mercy. It was also something else. Proof that the aliens had become so dependent on overwhelming force that they had forgotten how to adapt as she prepared for the arrival of their ultimate weapon. Hana smiled her famous smile. She had come to Korath to win her planet. Freedom. But she had accomplished something even more important. She had given the galaxy hope. By day 25, the Galactic Hunting Guild was facing its worst nightmare. The human broadcasts had sparked uprisings on 34 enslaved worlds. and the number was growing every day. Resistance movements that had been hiding in shadows for decades were now openly challenging their oppressors, inspired by the image of one small human female systematically defeating creatures that had killed thousands of the galaxy's finest warriors. On Korath, Hana had established what could only be described as complete dominance over the Deathworld ecosystem. She had built a secure base camp using materials harvested from her kills, complete with defensive systems that kept the remaining predators at bay. More importantly, she had begun actively seeking out and eliminating the most dangerous creatures on the planet. This is Hana broadcasting to anyone who might be listening. She said during one of her regular status updates that were now being intercepted and rebroadcast by resistance networks. Across the galaxy, I want every human still fighting on Earth to know that your sacrifice matters. I want every enslaved species watching this to understand something important. She paused to adjust the camera angle so that the pile of defeated monsters behind her was clearly visible in the shot. They tell you that resistance is futile, that their technology and their monsters are invincible. They are lying. Everything can be beaten if you are smart enough, stubborn enough, and willing to think differently. The key is not to fight them on their terms, but to make them fight on yours. The guild leadership was meeting in emergency session for the 5th time in 10 days. What had started as routine entertainment had become a galaxy-wide propaganda disaster that threatened the very foundation of their empire. We have lost control of the narrative, reported Information Minister Klex Tar. The human is not just surviving our ultimate test. She is making it look easy and explaining exactly how she is doing. Yet our own subjects are using her methods against us. The reports coming in from across the galaxy painted a picture of coordinated rebellion that no one had thought possible. The enslaved species were sharing tactical information and adapting Hana. Demonstrated principles for use against their specific oppressors on the ice world of Glacius. The crystalline frostlings had learned to use their natural camouflage abilities in new ways, turning their captors' advanced sensors against them by creating false readings that led hunting parties into deadly traps. On the desert planet Eridus, the sand-dwelling, dune walkers had adapted Hana technique of using environmental hazards as weapons. They were now triggering controlled sandstorms that buried entire alien garrison bases on the water world of Aquatica. The aquatic tide runners had learned to coordinate their attacks using acoustic signals similar to what Hana had used against the razor birds. They were sinking alien ships by attacking in perfectly synchronized groups. Each success was broadcast across resistance networks, inspiring other species to try similar tactics. The human had not just survived the impossible, she had created a template for rebellion that could be adapted by any species willing to think creatively. We cannot stop the broadcasts without admitting defeat, Vextar said during the emergency meeting. But we also cannot allow this to continue. The Empire's stability depends on our subjects believing that resistance is hopeless. The solution they had chosen was desperate but necessary. The Omega Predator was already in transit to Korath's surface. It was a creature that existed solely to kill, with no other biological functions whatsoever. It had been created in absolute secrecy using technology that violated every treaty the Guild had ever signed. The deployment was supposed to remain classified, but Hana Enhanced Communication System had been intercepting Guild transmissions for weeks. She knew exactly what they were sending and when it would arrive. On the planet's surface, Hana was making her final preparations. She had spent the last 5 days not just hunting the remaining apex predators, but studying them, learning everything she could about their biology and behavior patterns. She suspected that the Guild would eventually send something that was not part of the official challenge. Well, this should be very interesting, she said, as she tracked the incoming transport signature. They are so scared of me reaching that extraction point that they are breaking their own rules. Time to show them why that was a mistake. The Omega Predator was everything the Guild propaganda claimed and more. It was a perfect killing machine with enhanced intelligence, superior speed, devastating natural weapons, and absolutely no mercy or hesitation. It had been designed specifically to eliminate threats to the Guild power, and it had never failed a mission. But it was also something else entirely. It was proof that the aliens had become so dependent on overwhelming force that they had forgotten the most important lesson of warfare. Adaptation Hana spent her remaining days on Korath, preparing not just to survive the Omega Predator, but to send a message that would resonate across the galaxy. She was no longer fighting just for her own life or even for Earth freedom. She was fighting to prove that intelligence and determination could overcome any form of oppression. Her base camp had become a fortress, built from the remains of dozens of apex predators. Each creature she had defeated had contributed materials and knowledge to her defenses. The Shadow Beast claws were woven into armor that could phase through solid matter. The Razorbird feathers had been crafted into weapons that could cut through any known material. The Titan worm hide had been turned into barriers that could withstand massive impacts. But her greatest weapon was not any physical construction. It was the knowledge she had, gained from studying every creature on this Deathworld. She understood their biology, their psychology, their weaknesses, and their fears. She had become something that none of them had ever encountered before. A predator that was smarter than they were. The resistance movements across the galaxy were watching her preparations with intense interest. They could see that she was not just getting ready to survive another challenge, she was preparing to make a statement that would change everything on the mining world of Zerion. The Zephyrian rebels had synchronized their uprising to coincide with Hana's final confrontation. They knew that the galaxy would be watching, and they wanted their liberation to be part of the same historic moment. On the factory planet of Mechanus, the robotic constructors, who had been enslaved to build guild warships, began their rebellion by turning every weapon they had ever been forced to create against their masters. On the prison world of despair, the mixed population of political prisoners from 50 different species broke out of their containment facilities using coordinated tactics that mirrored everything they had learned from watching the human broadcasts. The Guild was losing control of their empire one world at a time, and they knew that everything depended on what happened in the next few days. If the humans survived her encounter with the Omega Predator, the rebellions would spread until the entire galactic order collapsed as the final challenge descended toward the planet's surface. Hana stood at the extraction point with her battered equipment and her unshakable smile. She had survived everything Korath could throw at her. Now it was time to face the Guild, desperation, and show the galaxy what happened when you cornered a human who had nothing left to lose. The Omega Predator was coming, and with it, the fate of every enslaved world in the galaxy. But Hana was ready. She had always been ready today. She would either become a martyr who inspired a galaxy-wide revolution or a living symbol that proved oppression could never defeat the human spirit. Either way, the Guild had already lost, they just did not know it yet. The Omega Predator landed at the extraction site exactly as the 30th day began. Its transport pod hit the crystal ground with enough force to shatter the formations for hundreds of meters in every direction. When the smoke cleared, a creature of absolute nightmares emerged from the wreckage. It stood 3 meters tall with natural armor that looked like it had been forged from black metal. Its forearms ended in claws that could slice through starship hulls, and its legs were built for speed that would make it nearly invisible when it moved. Its head contained intelligence that rivaled the galaxy's finest tactical computers, but with only one purpose: to kill anything that threatened the Guild. Power Hana stood 50 meters away watching the creature as it tested its limbs and scanned the environment with senses that could detect a heartbeat from kilometers away. She had spent the last 3 days preparing for this encounter, not by building bigger weapons or stronger defenses, but by thinking about the problem in ways that no one else would consider. "Hello, beautiful," she said to the creature in a voice loud enough for the galactic broadcasts to pick up clearly. "I have been waiting for you. Let me guess you are fast, strong, smart, and absolutely ruthless. You have probably never lost a fight in your entire artificial life. Unfortunately for you, I am not here to fight." The Omega Predator paused its threat assessment routines, trying to process this unexpected response. Every other opponent it had ever faced had either attacked immediately or tried to flee in terror. This human was standing calmly in the open, talking to it as if they were having a normal conversation. Its enhanced sensors detected no weapons, no traps, no sign of immediate threat. This should have been reassuring, but its tactical programming was sending warning signals throughout its systems. Something was fundamentally wrong with this scenario. See, here is what your creators do not understand. About humans. Hana continued slowly reaching into her pack while maintaining eye contact with the creature. "We are not the strongest or the fastest or the most naturally deadly species in the galaxy. What we are is the most adaptable. We solve problems by changing the rules of the game." The creature sensors analyzed the object she was removing from her pack. It appeared to be nothing more than a modified communicator device with some additional electronics attached. There were no energy signatures. That suggested weapons, no chemical traces that indicated explosives. "This little gadget has been recording everything that has happened here for 30 days, she said, holding up the device. "Every kill, every tactic, every moment of this hunt has been broadcast live to the entire galaxy. Right now, billions of beings are watching to see what happens next." The Omega Predator tactical systems were designed to handle any combat situation, but they had never been programmed for psychological warfare. Its creators had assumed that pure killing ability would be enough to handle any threat. They had not considered that the most dangerous weapon might be an idea. "If you kill me, you turn me into a martyr," Hana explained with the calm confidence of someone who had already won the real battle. "Every enslaved world will know that their oppressors had to break their own rules to stop one human female. If you let me reach extraction, I become living proof that the Empire power is not absolute." For the first time in its artificial existence, the Omega Predator experienced something that could only be described as confusion. Its programming demanded that it complete its mission and eliminate the threat, but its enhanced intelligence was capable of understanding the implications of what the human was saying. Kill the human and prove the guild weakness. Allow her to succeed and prove their failure. Either outcome would damage the Empire reputation and inspire further rebellion across the galaxy. "The beautiful thing about impossible choices," Hana said as she began walking slowly toward the extraction beacon, "is that sometimes the best solution is to refuse to choose at all." She moved with the calm confidence of someone who had already accepted every possible outcome. The creature watched her approach the beacon, its systems locked in a paradox that its creators had never anticipated. "You know what the real problem is?" she continued as she reached the extraction point. "You have been so focused on creating the perfect killer that you forgot to create the perfect solution. Violence is not always the answer. Sometimes the smartest move is to do nothing at all." The extraction beam began to power up, casting a column of blue light into the purple sky of Korath. But Hana was not finished with her message. She turned to address not just the Omega Predator, but the entire galaxy that was watching. "My name is Hana. I am human. For 30 days, I have survived everything this death world could throw at me, not because I am stronger or faster or more deadly than these creatures, but because I refused to give up. I refused to accept that the challenge was impossible." The beam began to solidify around her, but her voice carried clearly through the communication systems. "To every human still fighting on Earth, And to every enslaved species watching this broadcast, they are not invincible. Their monsters can be defeated. Their systems can be outsmarted. Their rules can be changed. All it takes is the courage to think differently and the determination to never surrender. As the beam lifted her from Korath's surface, the Omega Predator stood motionless, its perfect killing instincts paralyzed by the realization that sometimes the most dangerous weapon was not a claw or a fang or an energy blast. It was Hope Commander Vextar watched the successful extraction with the cold certainty that her empire was doomed. The human had done more than survive the Deathworld hunt, had transformed it from a demonstration of power into a symbol of resistance within.